Week 3 is going to go down as one of those that absolutely wrecked a lot of fantasy football owners. A lot of people are kicking themselves because they didn't start the right player or their guys busted again. But if you had grabbed any of the players I'm about to talk about on the waiver wire already and had them stashed, maybe even started them, you are loving it. This really could be a turning point for these players and for fantasy teams. So let's figure out why. Who were the surprise names that you have to go out and add? And of course, we're going to start with some more injuries first and who's next up. Let's start at quarterback. Justin Herbert got banged up last week. He was good to go. And then he got hurt again. This time it's an ankle injury. You saw him kind of walk gingerly off the field. A walking boot already for his right foot. He's saying he's a little sore, but he also has x-rays and an MRI scheduled, so that's not promising. Now, Justin Herbert, the guy we've been telling you, is not going to have a lot of fantasy value this year anyways, because we know and we have definitely seen so far, Jim Harbaugh just wants to run the ball and win with his defense. And they're doing it for the most part. But, of course, Herbert does still have some value, at least in a deep league or superflex league. If for some reason you were counting on him, you might need to look elsewhere. Taylor Heineke actually did come in as the backup. Wasn't Easton Stick, because Stick had some sort of a practice injury. But either way, you don't want Taylor Heineke. If you didn't want Herbert, you definitely don't want Heineke. And the Eagles were already without A.J. Brown. Could be for another week or two, not sure there. So Devontae Smith was stepping up until he got hurt. And this was a concussion, took a hard hit during the game. Probably will be in the protocol, and this definitely puts week 4 in doubt. It's possible the Eagles will be without their top 2 pass catchers. And then let's talk about the guy who's next up there. Britton Covey was actually the second leading receiver in week 2, but he also got injured in this game with a shoulder injury. So Jahan Dotson might have no choice but to play a huge role. Although realistically, we're just probably going to see a lot more of what we saw already this past week against New Orleans. It's Dallas Goedert just feasting. I mean, I don't know if he can repeat that kind of performance, but he's definitely going to get a huge target share because I'm not sure at this point who else they even have after Dotson. If you thought tight end position was bad enough already, oh, just wait. Let's talk injuries now. Sam Laporta was not really doing a whole lot in what should have been his bounce back game, and then he got carted off the field with an ankle injury. Now, he was only questionable to return, which means he wasn't ruled out immediately, so that sounds like maybe avoided a worst case scenario. It didn't seem serious, but at the same time, we don't know yet because it's still too early in the week. So Sam Laporta just going to have to keep an eye out. The next man up was Brock Wright, who actually did get a few receptions in this game. Not sure exactly how valuable Brock Wright is, but getting against tight end, I mean, who does have value at that position? And then Trey McBride followed suit not too long after that same game. He, towards the end, suffered a concussion, or at least suspected of a concussion, that really hard hit, helmet to helmet with Brian Branch. Didn't look good. So again, in the protocol, that definitely is going to put week 4 up in the air. So if you have McBride, one of the very few tight ends you could at least trust to be in your lineup, you might have to start digging for a streamer. Now let's talk Vikings. Good news, they won again. And I think this is actually good injury news. Justin Jefferson was cleared. He was fine. He played. And in this game, he actually did get x-rays afterwards because he jammed his finger, but they were negative, and this is not something serious. So it sounds like he will be fine. So Justin Jefferson, thankfully, is good to go, at least as far as we know. And then Sam Darnold, you might have seen, he took one play off because he was limping off the field. There was a knee injury after he got wrapped up, and he only missed that one snap. But after the game, they said he was going to get evaluated. So obviously Vikings fans are hoping he's okay. For fantasy purposes, I'm not going so far as to say he's a guy you really want to start in a 1-quarterback league because the volume is not quite there yet. They're winning a lot by their defense, and he's been good, but still, I just don't think we're quite there yet. But keep an eye on this one because obviously this could affect Justin Jefferson, Jalen Naylor, and Jordan Addison if he ever plays. And then former Vikings receiver Adam Thielen, who's now with the Panthers, might be getting a revival as well with Andy Dalton at quarterback. And sure enough, he caught a 31-yard touchdown pass, but on that exact play, he was injured and walked off the field, didn't come back. It was a hamstring injury, so we'll have to check on the severity of this. I mean, looked like he might actually be getting some sort of revival here, but, you know, with this injury, that obviously puts a damper on it. So let's check and see what Thielen's situation is before we go out to add him. All right, this week there are a lot of names that are definitely worth grabbing on the waiver wire. You know, after week one, you just can't go overboard. A lot of these guys are just 1 week wonders. We overreact. After week two, it's like, okay, maybe, but let's wait and see. And now I think we have finally gotten to the point where we can say, okay, I can read something into this. Now, the first one here is going to be pretty easy. Did you see Jauan Jennings? You might have heard that he was the best player in all of fantasy in week 3 and, you know, did some things that hadn't been done since Jerry Rice in San Francisco. So, yeah, I'd say he was worth adding. Now, this one is really tricky because a lot of people did pick him up midweek. We didn't know until after last Sunday. I think it was maybe Monday night, Tuesday, till we actually knew that Deebo Samuel was hurt and was going to miss. And then it wasn't even until the end of the week that we found out George Kittle was going to be out. So you probably were way past that waiver wire claim time for a lot of leagues. You know, Jauan Jennings was like, yeah, a decent ad, a speculative ad. Started to become a lot more interesting over the weekend. And now you really wish you had him, of course. But he is still out there, apparently, in almost 3/4 of fantasy leagues, depending on your platform, depending on what league size you're in, how competitive it is. Look, if Jauan Jennings is out there, of course, everybody is going to be throwing all their fab at him. And why wouldn't you after what he did? 11 catches, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's put up better numbers in this one game, his first as a starter, than a lot of these stud receivers have gotten over 3 games total. I mean, you knew it would be a good start when he got a touchdown right away in the first quarter, and then he had this 34-yard play, and then he wound up with another touchdown. That was just in the first quarter, but they kept going to him over and over and over again, the leading receiver and the leading target for Brock Purdy. You know, this was supposed to be a Brandon Ayuk day, and Ayuk was just okay. I mean, he hasn't really still done anything significant yet this season. Is Jennings actually the number 1 receiver here now? Well, that doesn't really matter, because regardless, Jennings has super high value right now. Debo is probably going to still miss at least another week. Kittle, who knows? It doesn't matter. Yes, you're going to have to go out and get Jennings if at all possible. Another player who's added here and there throughout the week, because it wasn't, again, until about midweek that we found out for sure Joe Mixon was going to be out. It was kind of downplayed at first. Didn't seem like this was a serious injury. And now it sounds like it's going to be multiple weeks. Oh, and then Dameon Pierce also hurt. So Cam Akers is now the guy in Houston. Now, Akers didn't have a great game, only 21 yards rushing on 9 carries. He did score a touchdown. It was a receiving touchdown. But here's the thing, it wasn't really about him not being effective or, you know, looking rusty or whatever. The Texans just got stomped, basically. They couldn't even try to establish the run because they fell behind early and they couldn't run at all in the second half. They were down by multiple scores. So I do think Akers will get better, of course, next week. He knows he's going to be the guy again. He's going to get all the touches. This should be definitely more competitive. I would hope the Texans would actually at least be able to win at home against the Jags next week. I mean, we'll see, but I do feel still pretty good about Akers. If nothing else, you have Mixon, you want to try to get Akers as a replacement, or you're still hurting because you lost Pacheco or CMC or anybody like that. There's very few workhorse running backs right now that are getting all the touches in the backfield, and Akers is now one of them. Then we have to go back to Carolina. You know, a lot of people wound up dropping Chuba Hubbard. Look, I totally understand. Don't blame me, because why would you want any piece of this Carolina offense after the first 2 weeks? But then we found out midweek, once again, Bryce Young not going to be the starter. Sure, Andy Dalton, maybe better than Bryce Young. But look, a lot of people just weren't buying into this, totally resuscitating this offense, you know, making this some sort of a prolific offense. Again, I don't blame you for thinking that way. But that's exactly what happened. The Panthers scored 36 points against the Raiders. Obviously, Andy Dalton had himself a game, but Chuba Hubbard seemed to benefit even more so than the receivers. Chuba Hubbard on the ground, 114 yards rushing, and he was also very viable as a receiver. 5 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Kind of aggravating that Miles Sanders did wind up coming in a little bit and got a touchdown. Kind of a garbage time score. I mean, whatever. Chuba Hubbard is still clearly the lead back here. And again, he's involved in the passing game. He's the main rusher here. This offense actually was clicking. It is not a scary matchup. Next week, they go back home and they're going to be playing the Bengals, who, again, it's a decent defense. On the run defense, not too bad. I think Chuba Hubbard is not only a great ad, he's also now back in the RB2 discussion. Now, Chicago Bears did not get the win in week 3, but we saw for the first time some signs of life from their passing offense. And let's go even further than that. Caleb Williams his first NFL touchdown, and his first 300-yard game. In fact, 363 yards and a pair of touchdowns to go with those turnovers. All right, so overall, real life, Caleb Williams, inconsistent, pretty bad in the first half, to be honest. A lot of Bears fans are ready to burn jerseys and riot and all this stuff. Fire Shane Waldron. They actually did a smart thing in the second half. Yeah, they were down and they did wind up losing. They weren't down big. It wasn't like they had to just throw out the playbook and just, go no huddle and just air it out. They didn't have to do that, but I think they just finally decided, look, this run game is not working. Just forget it. Let's just have Caleb Williams do his thing and chuck it. And he did 52 times. And he wound up getting yards, a couple of scores, like I said, and almost came from behind. At the very least, this is a step forward for him, build some confidence, and we've seen that he can produce when given the opportunity. We saw Rome Odunze step up big time. DJ Moore, of course, a great receiver. And then next week, we might get Keenan Allen back. And so the Bears actually have some life here. But the biggest reason I'm in on Caleb Williams, if he's available and you're looking for a streamer still, or let's say you tried the Derek Carr thing, didn't work out too great in week 3, look, Caleb Williams gets the Rams next week, and we've seen that Rams defense just give up tons of big plays to receivers. Obviously, Juwan Jennings was the latest one this past week, and yes, I do think that Caleb Williams can have another 300-yard day against this Rams defense. And you could always take a chance on Andy Dalton again. I don't hate that pick, but I'm going to go Caleb Williams as my first priority if I'm streaming quarterback. It was dropped by a lot of teams last week, so there's a good chance. Getting back to wide receiver, there's a nearly 100% chance you can pick up this player because he's 0% owned, or at least that's what it says on all the platforms. The Steelers might now finally have themselves a legit wide receiver 2 in Calvin Austin III. Now, you may have seen the highlight, Austin breaking free for that long touchdown. Okay, sure. Long scores, it happens, right? This guy's fast, busted coverages, whatever. I don't like to, pick up on a player just because of one big play. But again, I'm going a little deeper here. Let's start with the fact that Calvin Austin is the number 2 receiver now, definitely, unequivocally in this team because they really don't have anything else. And I'm serious, they really don't have anybody else. Roman Wilson, the rookie, you remember him? Healthy scratch this week. He's a guy who just has absolutely no relevance whatsoever at this point. And then Van Jefferson is technically there. He left this game with an eye injury. They've got nothing else. Calvin Austin was thrown in the mix and he responded. He was the second most targeted receiver on Pittsburgh's offense in week 3. And it wasn't just that one play. He wound up with 4 catches for 95 yards. And a touchdown. Austin is a burner. He can make those big plays. Justin Fields is playing really well. Now, I will just say this. Austin is better off as a guy who you can throw in there as an upside flex, for the bye weeks that are coming soon. I'm not going to tell you that he's a dependable fantasy asset, right? This Pittsburgh offense still is not exactly high scoring, but it looks like he's the guy now, and we know he's always had the talent. And there's a really good chance a lot of you are still looking for a tight end because besides the fact that all of them have been horrible, now half of them are hurt. So where do we turn first? Let's circle back to a guy that we abandoned after being in on him in the preseason, Ty Conklin of the New York Jets. Had himself a pretty decent outing on Thursday night. In fact, 93 yards on 5 catches, 6 targets. He's getting more action, at least he did in this game, than the receivers. He was outproducing Garrett Wilson and even more than Allen Lazard. This will change from game to game because just think Hunter Henry, right? Remember how all in people were in after week 2 and he seemed like a great pickup? Well, okay, Ty Conklin couldn't do absolutely nothing this coming week. I get that. But this is still a good situation overall for a tight end like him because the receiving core is not deep after the guys I mentioned, Lazard, Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson. There's really not much else here, and Mike Williams still working his way back from injury. And as far as tight ends go, Conklin is actually one of the most active in terms of running routes and being available for receptions. Just the receptions weren't there until week 3. After his Thursday night performance and before week 3 kicked off for everyone else, he was tied for 4th with a 76% route participation rate. And that is good. That means he's not out there just to block. He's actually running routes. And not just short dink and dunk, he's actually got an 8.4 average depth of target, which is 7th among all tight ends. Like all tight ends, he will be extremely inconsistent and probably frustrating, But if you're in need of one for this week, Conklin's going to be my first choice. And you know, last week I talked about Braylon Allen as a strong add. I'm going to say it again, still widely available. I think it's time to make sure that you secure him, especially if you have Breece Hall on your roster. Braylon Allen isn't just a handcuff here. He's been way more involved early in the season than anybody expected, and he's looked really good. I mean, he's getting involved not just as a pass catcher, which we didn't expect, but also near the goal line, which is really scary for Breece Hall owners. But if you pick up on Braylon Allen, you know then he could actually have some value even if Breece Hall isn't injured. In week 3 against the Pats, you know, Breece Hall got 16 rush attempts, Braylon Allen got 11. That's almost closer to a timeshare than anything. And Allen actually outrushed Breece in terms of yardage, 55 to 54, despite having fewer carries. Now again, I'm not scared that Allen's going to unseat Hall or anything, or that it's even going to be like a 50-50 situation. This was a game that really the Pats were never threatening the Jets, so they could give Allen a little bit more run. But man, Allen looks like he might actually have some standalone value. And again, he's such a high-end handcuff. If something should happen to Breece, I think you've got to secure him wherever you can. And I'm going to say the same for another backup rookie running back that might not be the backup much longer. Bucky Irving, also available in almost 2/3 of fantasy leagues. He's just a better runner than Rachaad White. I know this because in all 3 games so far this season, he has led the Bucs in rushing yards. And in fact, he is now averaging 6 yards per carry. This past week, 71 yards on just 9 attempts. It's almost frustrating that 9 attempts in week 1 and week 3 is his high. He deserves more. Now, they couldn't really run the ball too much because they were down for most of week 3. Okay, I get that. Rachaad White is still there. It's not like he's going to just disappear, but really, it should be Irving getting the early down work and the carries while Rachaad White is relegated to 3rd down and passing downs. Not sure if when that will happen, but man, Irving has such huge upside as a rusher. He has a tremendous ceiling if something should happen to Rachaad White, or if they just decide to do that and minimize White's role. Sometimes when you pick up a player, even if it's a number 2 running back, it doesn't have to be because you need somebody. It's because you're looking for that upside. And this is definitely one of those types of players that you should be stashing. As soon as you get those waiver claims put in, you're going to be getting ready to set those lineups. So you need to check out our start sit videos, trade ideas, and everything else to help you win for week 4. Here's this week's playlist.